and welcome to this beginner series. In this video, we're going to be looking at just a couple of the poses that we might use in a cool down or a warm up part of a physical yoga practice. So we'll be breaking those poses down. We'll also be looking at some different options that you can use and different ways to support the pose and different variations just to make your practice a little bit more enjoyable. So for this video, you need a mat or some space to practice, and then you might also need a block or a strap for this one. If you don't have blocks or straps at home, that is absolutely fine, there's no problem. You can always use something similar, so maybe some books stacked up might work instead of blocks, or instead of a strap, a belt or scarf, something similar to the strap. But yeah, when you're ready, we'll get started. We're going to begin on our backs first of all. So if we come all the way down, and in fact, the very first pose that we're going to do, it's called Shavasana, and it's often used sometimes at the beginning of the practice, sometimes at the end, or usually at the end. But this one essentially is lying down on the mat. So in Shavasana, we start here and end here because it gives us an opportunity just to find stillness, find some space for us to connect, usually with our breath if it's towards the beginning, and towards the end just to kind of relish in the moment after a physical practice. It's a place of relaxation really, and it can be used for relaxation as well as meditation. But we'll come down onto our backs for this one, and we're going to start to lengthen the legs all the way out onto the mat. You want to take the feet about as wide as the mat and bring the arms down beside you, and essentially this is Shavasana. This doesn't feel good for everyone, and that's okay if that's you. If you feel like it's a little bit uncomfortable on your back, the best thing to do is bring the feet up onto the mat, keeping them nice and wide, and then bring the knees together in the center, and that will do the exact same thing. Usually in Shavasana we have the arms down beside us, and palms facing up kind of invites us to answers from the universe, whereas palms facing down is a little bit more introspective and it invites us to answers from within. So I think generally people have their palms facing up, but again, it's kind of up to you and what feels best for your body. Sometimes it's more comfortable to place the hands onto the belly, and that's okay as well. But usually this is used for relaxation. And so this needs to feel relaxing. So you kind of want to focus on that more than anything. Does this pose feel comfortable? Does it feel relaxing to you? And if not, how can we change that? Another option, if you've got your blocks, is to maybe pop a block behind the head. I know that feels a little bit more comfortable for some people, but again, not for everyone. And often in this pose, we either soften the gaze or close down the eyes completely just to help us bring our awareness inward. So this is Shavasana. So moving on, we're going to come into a pose called Happy Baby. So we'll stay on our backs for this one. Sometimes this is used towards the beginning of the practice, mostly used towards the end in the cool down. And this is quite a hip opening pose. It works into your inner thighs and the groin. But for this one, we're going to start to draw our knees up into our chest. So the traditional way to do this is to take our index and middle finger, the peace fingers, around our big toes. And this is called a toe bind in yoga. And the idea is that we want to keep the nice deep bend in the knees that we've got and start to draw the knees down towards the earth, either side of the body. And of course, this is quite a deep stretch. So if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel good, then there are options that we can take. So if you feel more comfortable holding on to the insides or even the outsides of the feet, then that is an option. You can also hold on to the ankles, the shins. If you wanted to, you can take the hands to the inner thighs. It all does the same thing. It creates the same sensation. So either of these options are perfect. If none of these feel good, then simply bringing the knees into the chest and taking the knees out to the side, drawing them up towards your shoulders, will do a very similar thing again. So these are all options that you can take. It's a recline pose, so we want to be able to kind of soften into our shoulders. The head should be relaxed down. If you feel yourself straining and lifting up to take a hold of your legs, then it probably means that you need to take one of the other options. And we also want to try and keep our tailbone grounded here as well. So the lower part of our spine, I often see people lifting the tailbone away, again, to grab the legs. But by keeping the tailbone down, we are lengthening the spine rather than creating that rounding and that curve. So yeah, this one's happy baby. And this one, often we have a little rock from side to side here as well. This is a great pose that kind of just reminds us and encourages us to have fun with our practice. It can be serious. Yoga can definitely be serious, and it can be kind of an exploration of ourselves and kind of an internal thing, but also it can be fun and it can be playful, and it doesn't always have to be that. So yeah, nice. We'll release the feet. And then from here, we're going to come up to a seated position on the mat. We're going to do some folds. So generally speaking, folds are done towards the end of the practice, although sometimes you'll see them towards the beginning, the middle, kind of wherever the teacher feels they're needed. Or seated folds anyway are done towards the end. So we're going to come to a seat, and in our seated forward fold, you can sit on a block. So something that we want to think about when we're folding forward is our pelvic tilt. We want to be able to lift the pelvis, lift the tailbone even, the pelvis drops. And it's almost like you're sticking your bum out. And for lots of us, it's really difficult to do that. And you might find that as you come to a seat with the legs lengthened, especially that you're rounding and you feel like you're almost struggling to come forward, you're fighting. So sitting on a block can help with pelvic tilt, and it can make it a lot more comfortable to fold forward. So that is an option if you want to take it. But we're going to sit nice and tall, lengthening up through the spine. Draw the toes towards the face, and then place the hands down beside you with the palms resting on the mat or just above. And this is called seated staff. And this is quite a difficult pose, just sitting here. Lifting and lengthening, and yeah, it's quite difficult all on its own. Like the back will start to work. Yeah, it's a challenging pose just sitting in stillness. But from here we'll come into a fold. So for this, if you want to, you can grab a strap. So the aim of our forward fold isn't necessarily to touch the toes. It's more about creating the sensation in the back of the legs. So maybe in the calves, the hamstrings, that sort of area. And to help us do that and help things feel more comfortable, we can use a strap. So if you find when you're folding forward that your hands don't come all the way down to the toes, that's absolutely fine. What we can do instead is we can take the strap, so bending the knees, bringing the feet towards the face, taking the strap round the ball of the foot, the widest part of the foot rather than the arch, and then start to lengthen the legs out. So the strap fills up the distance between your hands and your feet. It does that for you and makes it a little bit more comfortable. So we'll take the strap around the balls of the feet, sit nice and tall, and then we're going to start to slowly walk the hands down the strap just as far as feels good. And as we do this, we want to try and focus on staying lengthened through the spine. So folding from the hips here rather than folding from the waist and rounding forward. Again, it's not about bringing your forehead down towards your legs. It's about creating sensation. So just walking the hands down the strap as far as feels good. Keep your gaze out in front. Lovely. And just holding maybe for 2 more breaths, seeing how that feels. 1 more breath. Fabulous, perfect. And we'll come all the way back up to seated, and we can pop the strap over to one side now just for a moment. For some of us that are maybe a little bit more flexible and have more range and length in our hamstrings, another option, if say you find it really easy to take the hands to the toes, is you can actually use blocks to increase the stretch. So you can grab a block and you can take it behind the feet and instead have the hands on the block, and that is an option as well. So yeah, different things. The blocks aren't necessarily there just to help support us in a pose. They can also increase a sensation and a stretch too, so they're very useful. But when you're ready, we'll start to make our way around to hands and knees, and we're going to finish today's video with cat and cow. And this is a pose that is probably used in 95% of physical practices and physical classes that you go to. It's one that is very familiar, and without even having practiced yoga before, we've probably already heard of cat and cow. And it works through spinal flexion and spinal extension, so it's good for mobilizing the spine and increasing kind of flexibility in that area. So we'll come to hands and knees, and we're starting in a pose called tabletop position. So you want to spread the fingers nice and wide here, and you want to make sure that the hands are about shoulder width apart, so your shoulders are directly above your wrists. Same with the hips. We want the the knees about hip width apart. And in yoga, it's rather the knees, we want the knees to be underneath the hip bones, so the bony part, rather than the outer hip. So the joints are almost stacking on top of each other. And then from here, we're going to start to lower our belly down towards the mat, lift the tailbone and lift the gaze. And this is spinal extension. This is cow pose. As you do this, think about pressing through the hands, lifting up through the crown of the head, and see if you can draw the shoulders back to open the heart. And then from here, we're going to start to round through our spine. So we're tucking the tailbone under and the chin in towards the chest as we press firmly through the hands, creating that arch and rounding in our spine. And this one's cat pose, a little bit like an angry cat, a hissing cat. We'll do this a few more times. It's usually done with the breath. So as we inhale, lower the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the gaze. And then exhale, round through the spine, press down through the hands, squeeze the navel in. Lovely. One more time. Inhale, lower the belly, lift the tailbone, lift the gaze. And then exhale to round. Lovely. Perfect. Nice. Going back to neutral. So that was just a few of the poses that we do kind of in our warm-up and in our cool down, some of the more gentle opening and stretchy poses that we do. There are so many more, but just to keep it short for this video, we've left it at that for today. But thank you for joining me. Hopefully you feel a little bit more confident and a little bit more kind of sure of what you're walking into when you go to a yoga practice. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.